Need my ladder for thumbnail footage. Where can I put this where it's not like totally ruining the vibe? All right, ta-da! Hi, hello, my name's Allie. I'm an independent graphic designer coming to you from just outside Toronto, and this is my channel where I talk about what I'm knitting, how it's going, and what it's costing me. Oh, hello, Clapper. Are you coming to join? Hi. What's up, bud? Yeah, go lay there and everybody can admire you. No, if you go there, they can't see you. Oh, hi. Excuse one arm back here while I pet my dog. He apparently really needs it right now. But anyway, as for things we're covering today, we have a finished object, if you recognize what I'm currently wearing. And I also have not an actual new cast on to show you, but discussions about the new cast on, a plan for the new cast on. And anyway, as for my mug and tea of the day, I'm drinking out of my little alpaca mug that I got on my trip to Peru. It's so cute. It's from Zig Ceramics. And I am just drinking Twinings Earl Grey today from a tea bag because I don't have the mental capacity today for loose leaf tea. It's just been a week. There's been a lot of weird disruptions to the routine. I had to go take Copper to the special doggy allergy vet because I love him very much, and when his allergy symptoms aren't treated appropriately, he tries to eat himself alive. And no, it's not close to me, so that's a fun thing we get to do every 6 months. And then driving there, I got a chip in my windshield, so I also got to go take that to get repaired this week before the crack got any bigger, before it was unable to be repaired. And fun fact out of this, I did learn PSA, if you're Canadian, because I have no idea how this works everywhere else, but if you're Canadian, very high odds that your car insurance actually will cover the repair of a chipped windshield for $0, like no deductible. This was great news. It was a very annoying thing to have to go do and take care of, but it was very fun to look at that invoice. So amongst other things, it's just kind of been a chaotic week, and I'm also going to be away this weekend, so I don't have the chance to like get caught up on these things over the weekend the way I usually would. I still need to pack for the weekend and filming this on a Friday night. Not to worry, you're not seeing this Saturday after I film it. It would simply be impossible for me to operate on that timeline. So this is the Friday a couple weeks before you're seeing this video, but it's just been a little bit hectic. It did not help that I really wanted to get this top done for this episode because I was like, it's so close that if I don't have it done for filming today, I'm gonna have to talk about it in yet another episode. And I just like don't think I really will have many different things to say about it. So I'd really love to just be able to show the finished object and say all of my thoughts about it today. So I'm glad we've arrived at that point today, but it did perhaps come at the cost of preserving a little bit of sanity this week or getting a few other sort of life admin things done that would make me feel a little bit less scattered right now. So I do feel a little bit like a chicken with my head cut off in a way that was entirely self-inflicted. I don't really have a better time to film, and the show must go on. So here we are with our Twinings tea. That's how we got on the subject. And let's actually talk about knitting now. I'm not going to tell you right now about the top that I'm wearing because you're going to hear about that in 2 seconds when we discuss our finished object. Before we get to our project updates though, I want to tell you about our sponsor for today's video, Skillshare. I have had a Skillshare account longer than I've been knitting. You know, the little whooshy transition slides that I use? This one, that's a repeating pattern that I created watching a Skillshare class, Introduction to Designing Repeating Patterns in Illustrator by Elizabeth Olwin. I had been wanting to try making these kinds of patterns for years, but the idea just absolutely broke my brain for some reason, and the class just put it all back together and made it so much simpler than I made it out to be. That's just one of a bunch of Skillshare classes that I've taken to build my skill set as a graphic designer, and I've used it just for fun too. One of my favorite artists is named Jessie Roulette. I have a couple of her pieces in my home, absolutely love them. And she has a class called Joyful Abstracts with Acrylic Painting. It got me doodling with a paintbrush in a way that I've always really struggled to do. I've always been super representational in my art. So whether you want to learn how to customize your knits, like we were talking about in one of my recent videos with Brandy Cheyenne Harper's class, Perfect Fit Knits, Understanding and Modifying Knitting Patterns, or you want to broaden your creative outlets with something else, Skillshare lets you learn directly from real creatives who are so talented, knowledgeable, and successful in fields like art and illustration, design, photography, and so many more. So if you want to give it a try, the first 500 people to use my link in the description or scan the QR code will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today. All right, so finished object time. So as you can see, this is my finished Ardent top by Kindred Red. So let's run those project stats one last time. So this is a sport weight pattern from Pom Pom magazine. It accommodates bust sizes up to between 60 to 62 inches, just depending on how much of the recommended positive ease that you want. And I knit a size 3, but to get closer to the dimensions of a size 2, because I decided to downsize my needles and create a denser fabric for this one, because I just did not love how my swatch was looking. So if you're looking at knitting this and you want more details about that, I recommend going back to look at my previous updates about this project where I got into that in a little bit more detail there. So because this one's from Pom Pom magazine, you have to buy the whole magazine. It's 11 Great British pounds or about 21 Canadian dollars. I knit this out of the recommended yarn, which is Kelborn Woolens Mojave in the colorways natural and bright yellow. I literally just copied the colors from the project photos, which is not something that I usually do, but I was just so in love with it. I was like, it's perfect. I'm looking at color options and I simply don't see a version that's better than this. So I sourced this yarn from the Tea Cozy in Seattle because I was having a very hard time finding places to source it from, and particularly places that had both of these colors in stock. I don't think that I could even find both of the colors within Canada, like not even just at the same place, but just like at all. I forget which one it was, but one of the two just like did not seem to exist here anymore at the time that I was looking. So ordered it from the Tea Cozy. Yes, that does mean I got hit with duties. So in terms of yarn costs, why do I not see the duty in my notes? I do have written down that it cost me 119 Canadian dollars, including 27 of that was shipping. What was the duty? Why is that in my notes? Have I not been discussing this in previous videos? Did I just pull old notes? Editing Allie is gonna have to deal with this. So allegedly my total project cost is $140 Canadian, but again, I think duty is still missing from that, so stand by. And this is a project that is knit flat. Mostly. The sleeve ruffles are in the round, which I was very excited when it was time to get to those, but because the sort of color blocking effect is done using intarsia, it is knit flat and then seamed at the end, which we'll talk about in a minute. And for timescale reference, I started this project on July 11th and I cast it off on August 28th. So last time I was updating about this on the channel, it had no sleeves. So this is a big change from the last time that you saw it. And it's also been seamed together. Last time I was holding up just like a strange rectangle with like a neck-shaped hole in the middle. And the back was knit up to where you can see this stitch marker currently. So everything below that is new from last time, and like I said, the sleeves. So I think before we get into more detail about the rest of the process, I'm gonna get up and show you the full thing. Need my ladder for thumbnail footage. Where can I put this where it's not like totally ruining the vibe? All right, ta-da! This is the completed thing. Show you the back. So you can see there's a split hem, and the back is, I think, about 2.5 inches longer than the front. I hope it's not super wrinkly at the back. It very well may be. I have found that this material, when I sit and it kind of gets like scrunched up behind me on a couch or something, it is kind of prone to holding that wrinkle for a bit. So I think that's just kind of a thing about this fiber. It's, oh, I didn't mention before when I was sitting down, it was cotton and linen, I think. So it's just, it's not super forgiving on the wrinkle front, but I'm willing to forgive that because it's so cute. Like this feels like a very different thing than anything that I've knit before. It just feels like it occupies a different category of style. Like this feels like something that I would have bought in like a cute boutique that's like filled only with clothing from different independent designers. You know what I mean? Like it just has this sort of like quirky, fun, artsy side to it, but in a way that feels like refined and curated, and not in the way of like, I'm a kindergarten teacher and I made this for myself, isn't that so fun? You know what I mean? Which, like, to be fair, I have knit things that I will put in that latter category, and I do love them. Don't you dare take them away from me. But it does feel very fun to have something that occupies this other category. I wouldn't have thought at all when I started knitting that this would be like a category of thing that I could make for myself with knitting. I think that the summer fiber of it especially makes it feel very different. If this same top was knit out of wool, I think it would have still more of a like, oh, isn't that cute? You knit yourself a shirt kind of feeling to me. The fact that it's specifically this summer fiber and kind of the specific sort of texture and drape that gives to it, it just feels very deliberate. Again, it doesn't feel like, oh, I knit, so I like found a way to make this kind of garment through knitting and it's a thing that's made of wool that wouldn't normally be. Like it feels like if this existed in a little indie designer boutique, this is exactly how it would be made and what it would look like. So I just really love it. I think it's really cute. And I really love the combination of the sort of frilly girly ruffle with this very like bold geometric color blocking. I just think it's really fun and it balances it really nicely. I don't really like to wear things that are really ruffly unless it's very strongly juxtaposed with something else that kind of helps to balance it out. And I love that this shirt kind of does that within itself. And it's not about this needing to be styled in a super particular way in order for it to feel like something that belongs as part of my style. It just is all of those things all on its own, which makes it feel more practical and like I will have more options of how to wear it. My only complaint with the fit of this is that I feel like, despite the fact that there is a lot of ease here and it's a very boxy style, I feel like the drape of the fabric is not laying in a super boxy way. Like it is still for some reason kind of trying to like follow the line of my body, which I'm not sure, like, did it just need like even more positive ease to not do that? Or is that just a thing that like the nature of this drape of the fabric is just kind of gonna do? Like, is it just gonna kind of cave inward until it finds body to make it stop. Because like in my ideal world, I would love for it to kind of like sit out in this boxy shape like this. And that's just not what it wants to do. It just keeps kind of laying itself down and flaring a little bit where the hips do. And I did block this, I pinned it all out very square, so it's not anything to do with that. I think it seems to just be the drape, but I'm curious if this is something that you have run into, if you have figured out a sort of, oh, you need to be like either under or over this amount of ease in order for it to do what you want it to do boxy wise. If this makes sense to you. If it doesn't, let's move on. Okay, so now that you've seen it, let's chat more about the process of getting it finished. So first of all, another cord bites the dust on my interchangeable set. I'm starting to think that the cords that come with the Luca needle sets must just have like a 3-year shelf life, because I think, is that true? 3 years? Yeah, so like kind of early mid 2022 is when I would have bought that Cypher set. And in the last like 4 weeks, I've had 2 of my cords suddenly snap, like right where that little metal piece at the end meets the plastic. So I had just ordered a replacement for the one that broke, plus a couple of others. And now I'm like, well, good thing I got a couple of others. But like maybe I should have been ordering even more, because at this rate, I suspect that the other ones that I got probably aren't long for this world. So after my last project update, I continued for a while knitting down the back. And then I was kind of like, I was just getting kind of antsy with this like knitting back and forth. I was like, okay, I get it. Just like do this for many, many, many more inches. It's fine. And then I was kind of like, I feel like I was enjoying working on this more on the front side, which was the exact same process, like the same, just knitting stockinette flat for many, many inches. And I was happy to be doing it. And so I was kind of like, I'm not really enjoying this right now. Maybe this project would benefit from a bit of a change of pace, so I kind of took that as my time to pause, put the back on hold, and that was when I went in and did the sleeves on these, which were such a nice break because they are knit in the round. It was the first time I've got to knit in the round since May? Yeah, my colorwork sweater, because after that was my lace cardigan, which I guess technically I did do sleeves in the round, but sleeves in the round don't count. Small circumference is not nearly as nice. So getting to get back to knitting the round was so nice. Once the ruffle increases were done, I could do it fully in the round, like no magic loop or anything. It did fit on my smallest cable size. So once that was going, I was just like, oh yes, we're off to the races, come on. I can just sit here and relax. So I really enjoyed working on the sleeves on these until I got to the end. So the way that you finish these off, because this is not a case where we want like ribbing at the edge, right, to keep it from rolling. So what you do is you knit a purl row that becomes your fold line, and then you knit a few more rows, and then you're supposed to fold it over and like sew it to the other side. So you have this like little folded hem on the sleeve. And my first thought was like, no, I don't want to sew it. I hate sewing things. If I can limit my use of a tapestry needle in my knitting process as much as possible, I will do it. And I had done that earlier on this project, and I went over this in more detail in previous updates. So I was thinking like, I don't want to do that. What if instead I just fold over this edge and then do like a knit two together and bind out all the way around the sleeve? That should in theory accomplish the same thing. And it looked promising for a few stitches, but sort of the further that I got around, the more I started to be like, is this flipping out? Like, is it doing this? And the further I went, the more obviously it was doing that. And sort of at first I was like, I think this is within a realm that like I could just block it to lay flat. I think that'll be fine. And then the further and further that I got, the more I lost faith in that idea, the more concerned I started to get. And I was sitting there thinking, I mean, like, this isn't a quick process either, like, because these are ruffle sleeves, there's a lot of stitches on this needle. So as much as it'll suck to go back now that I'm like halfway around, you know, it'll suck more going back when I'm all the way around and after I blocked it and waited for it to dry and then been unhappy. So I decided to rip back. I was like, okay, fine. Guess this is a case where I should have just listened to what I was told to do. So I got it back on my needles and I put it away. I was like, okay, I see that I need to sew this. Fine, I can accept that, but not today. So that sleeve went on hold, the other sleeve went on hold, and that was when I went back and finished knitting the body. And at that point, as predicted, after having my break of knitting the round, I was much happier to go back to knitting my last few inches on this flat. I just needed just a little bit of something different, and that fully did the trick. And I think that this is something that, like, in thinking about it, I've done this many times in projects, and I think that this is a thing where, like, I, as a fairly monogamous knitter, I will sometimes have people ask, like, don't you get bored of only working on one thing? Like, what if you feel like doing a different kind of thing, or you just want to break? But to me, like, I find that most of the time in a project, there are multiple different things that can be done kind of in different orders and it doesn't really matter. So if I'm starting to get antsy with a project, I tend to just use that as an opportunity to go get started on a different part of it. That's something that if I weren't feeling antsy about this, I might be dreading having to do later because I'm feeling antsy. It's kind of a two birds, one stone where like I get it out of the way and don't mind doing it so much because I'm just happy to not be doing this anymore. So for me, that's things like going in and adding the neckband on a sweater when like maybe I only have a raglan down to here, but now it has a neck on it, so I know how it's gonna fit, right? Or pausing working on the body to knit some sleeves, and then I don't end up on Sleeve Island later, which is really nice. So I think that sometimes it can help to just like look for opportunities to change up the pace for ourselves within the project we're already working on. And like, that's not to say that everybody should be a monogamous knitter at all. If you love having a million projects on the needles, fantastic. I just think it's a thing where like, if you mostly just like to work on one thing, but sometimes get a little bit antsy, it's an option. And I think one that's easy to forget about sometimes when we're following a pattern, which is inherently written in like a linear way, you know? So actually on that note, another break that I took from knitting the potty back and forth was once I got to the point where, because there's a split hem, so once I got past the point where like the seaming goes, I paused knitting the body to seam up the sides as well. And that one I was pleasantly surprised to find didn't take as long as I feared that it would. When's the last time that I seamed? The last like real memory I have of seaming was my squiggle sweater, which I hated because that one is a set-in sleeve, and I found trying to line things up around the edges of the sleeve caps like horrible, and I did it multiple times and I still like one shoulder looks way better than the other. One of them does something like kind of weird and boxy, and I was just like, I simply can't do this one more time. I will lose my mind and I don't think it'll be any better. And I understand very much why the set-in sleeve was so hard for me to do, because you're not just like following a straight line with your mattress stitch. It's much harder to figure out how the stitches should line up. But even the part that was just a straight vertical line on that one just about killed me. I, for some reason, found it really hard to keep things lined up and understand like which stitch on this side corresponds over here. And that was partly an issue of just like struggling to sort of read the selvage edge and not understanding like where's the new stitch and what's just sort of like the funny bump half loop thing. I just found it really hard to do. So I was pleasantly surprised to find this time that seaming up those sides just in the straight line was much easier and quicker than I feared that it would be. What was not quicker was all of the rest of the finishing touches, which, so not including the side seaming because I was already done, finishing the sleeves, like doing the sewing down here and then doing the folded hem on the back, like upwards of 5 hours. Again, not including the side seams. Like I was done knitting and it still took me 5 hours to make this into like a finished garment. I didn't love that. I am someone who tends to avoid seamed patterns. I'm also someone who tends to avoid bottom-up patterns, which this one is. Thankfully, this one was intended to be a cropped length, which I think there's a lot more sort of forgiveness and wiggle room in exact length when you're planning for it to be cropped, so I was less worried about that here, and honestly just kind of willing to take more of a risk on this one because I just love the pattern so much that I was like, I don't love how it's made, but I really want to make it. So here we are. So this pattern is one that very much like was all of my red flags, right? Like it's bottom up, it's heavily seamed. Why did I sign myself up for this? And you know, most of the time working on it, I was like, oh, it's not so bad. You know, working flat, it's not so bad. Okay, seaming the sides, not so bad. And then yesterday, I was like, okay, I need to get this finished tonight so I can block it overnight and have it to record with tomorrow. And it was my whole night, whole night, and stayed up late to do it. Like, it was so much worse than I feared it was gonna be. And that's even with, again, like me making some adjustments to make it easier for me. So in this case, again, instead of sewing up the back hem, I did this by folding it over, doing a knit two together and binding off. So that's how I did the back hem. It makes me feel better for some reason when I can do things with knitting needles instead of a tapestry needle. So the improv worked there, even though it didn't work on the sleeves. And then I had to do the sewn edging on the sleeves since I learned that my rogue methodology did not work there. And that took forever, like so much of that 5 hours was that. Like I want to say that was at least 3 hours to do the two sleeves. There's a lot of stitches on these. And then I was also worried as I was working on it, it wasn't curling like outwardly as badly as it was with my previous hack job method that I attempted, but it wasn't not curling out. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it this way because this is what the pattern's telling me, and I don't know a better way to do it because I tried, But if I do all this and the edge of this sleeve doesn't lay flat, like there will be blood. I don't know whose, I don't know how. It's not gonna be a good time. I won't be happy. At this point I have no choice but to proceed and trust in the process. So I did that. And when I was done sewing each one, it was like looking touch and go. I was like, okay, I think blocking can make this happen, but I do think that I kind of need to pin it quite a bit, which is also interesting because it's a ruffled edge. So even just trying to find like the space to like spread it out and pin it on the mats that wasn't like overlapping onto the shirt, just because of how big that radius actually is when it's fanned all the way out, it was actually impossible to spread it all the way out. But then I was also like, but do I even want to? Because if I do that, is that going to mean that it's drying kind of without the like ruffle wave in the fabric? And is that going to mean that the sleeves don't like do what they're supposed to do? Is it going to do just a weird like almost like a trumpet shape, you know, with no ruffle but just like a flare? I don't know. And so I kind of just did what I could come up with that seemed physically possible given the constraints in front of me, and this is what that resulted in. I think that there are some sort of segments of it where, especially where I use the longer pin things, that are a little bit more flat and less ruffly than maybe they would be or should be. So like next time this gets washed, I might experiment a bit with exactly how I pin it. But overall, I feel like this worked out pretty well. The edges of the sleeve aren't really curling out the way that I feared they would. So hooray, the method, even if I did hate it, did work. Now, the one issue with pinning this out, because I was like, oh, I want to make sure like the bottom line is really nice and clean. And I don't actually know if this will have been super visible on camera when I was trying it on, but like I can see it looking at it that like the spots where the pins were, like when the pins were taken out, didn't automatically fill in those little tiny holes in the way that wool usually does. So this is just another, like, I'm not super used to working with fibers that aren't wool. I've done it before, but not a lot. I think that in the last few hours since I took it off the blocking mats, I do think it's gotten better. I don't think that it's perfect, and I'm curious to see what it looks like on camera, but I feel like it's pretty good. Another part of that 5 hours was just weaving in all of the ends, which in some of my recent projects, I've sort of taken pity on my future self and like paused partway through to weave in a bunch of those ends, again, as sort of a way to just like have a change of pace working on the project. I didn't do that this time. There's something in my head about like, I think again, because it's not wool, I think I was just sort of concerned about weaving in ends and like, is it gonna be more visible? Like, I just know that this fabric is just not as forgiving in terms of like hiding things. So I think I just felt a little bit hesitant because of that. And again, not in a way that really meant or did anything in the end. Like in the end, I just wove in the ends as I always do, and I think it turned out perfectly fine, perfectly normal looking, but it was sort of just enough of a mental hurdle in my brain to keep me from electively doing it earlier in the project as like, oh, just like a fun break, rather than like, no, I will do this at the absolute last minute when I'm stuck doing it. So that's when it happened. I also, as one of my finishing touches, found that the base of the v-neck on both the front and the back was just sort of pulling in a way where you could see that those stitches were sort of being stretched apart from each other. It was just looking a little bit more open. And I think it even does tell you, you know, like, okay, this is where we're splitting for the v-neck. Like, make sure you pull that yarn super tight. And like, I tried, and I'm a tight knitter, so like I would think that I did it pretty tight, but it was not enough. And I was not super loving the like slight scraggly effect you were getting at the base of that V. So when I was weaving in my ends, I just took a piece of yarn on both the front and the back and just sort of like weaved it in and around the stitches that are like right around the V, just to sort of like fill in a little bit of that extra space, kind of cinch those stitches just a tiny bit closer than they were. And I don't think it's like a perfect solution, but I do think that the way that it looks this way, like, you would be unlikely to notice it without attention being called to it. Whereas I felt like before, you might just actually notice it just on its own. And so I was just trying to avoid that. And I feel like this worked. And doing all these finishing touches, I had been thinking that I was going to run into an instruction that was like, and now crochet all the way up the center front and all the way up the center back, to just kind of close up like an extra seam in between the two color blocks of intarsia. And I think I thought that because on the back there are instructions to crochet up it, but this is a key distinction because in the pattern, the back of the top satch is supposed to look like this. That's not what mine looks like. I just decided that I wanted it to look the same way that the front does, so I didn't add this third color at all. So in the pattern, it has you crochet that little coral line up the center back, but there's actually no crochet called for on the front. So I was like, oh, this actually isn't intended as like a polishing up finishing thing. It's just like a design element that in this case doesn't apply to me because it's tying in a color that I'm not using to an element that doesn't exist in mine. And at first I was kind of like, interesting because I had sort of been banking on that pulling things together in a way, because when I was working on knitting it, I felt like there was kind of a gutter happening between the two colors from the intarsia in a way where I was a little bit surprised about, because I've done intarsia before and hadn't really encountered this as a thing. But this is kind of unusual in that it's a perfectly straight vertical line where the colors join, whereas intarsia is often used to create all sorts of different kinds of shapes that don't have such a consistent straight line. So I think it would be easier for to sort of hide any little tiny imperfections where colors join each other, because it's just not such like a long line of it. So I'd been kind of concerned about that while I was working on it and really banking on this crochet element to pull it together. So at first I was like, well, maybe I'll just crochet up mine anyway, because like it was supposed to be there on the back for just design purposes. Maybe it'll still help do what I'm trying to do. I have never crocheted anything, but I've used a crochet hook to fix a dropped stitch many times. So I was like, okay, well, this is just exactly that, because I'm just like laddering the crochet hook up from the bottom to the top, right? Like in between these stitches to add another stitch, right? So I started trying to do this and quickly realized, you know what's actually different about this from what you usually do? Is that when you usually do this, you're just working an existing stitch made out of existing yarn up ladders that also already exist. What you're trying to do here is add new yarn to crochet up this ladder. If you crochet, I'm sure this is really easy, really simple. I don't knit continental because I do not, to save my life, understand how to tension yarn in my left hand the way that crochet and continental knitting require. I don't get it. I've tried. Perhaps given a decade of forced practice, I could figure it out. But I was trying to figure this out at like 11 p.m. last night, and I was like, this is not going well. And I was looking down at the shirt and I was like, you know what? Now that I'm not like mid-row, like at the part where it splits because I'm like working the joint of the intarsia, I actually don't really see this seam that I had a problem with at all. I think maybe it's just fine. I think maybe I should leave it alone. So that's what I did. Yesterday was not the day that I learned to crochet. It was definitely not happening. I had to do just a little chain when I was making my Christmas stockings last year. Even that, such a struggle. The tensioning was horrible. And I think in that case, it was a bit more forgiving because I was creating a chain out of nowhere, like on its own, rather than trying to like fit it into ladders that existed and like pull it through without dropping the yarn out of the, I don't know. Maybe it's not actually easier. I survived it last year is the key thing. This year I did not survive it. I don't think that I have a future in crochet, which isn't really a great loss to me because crochet doesn't really tend to fit into my personal style nearly as well as knitting does, but it's just sort of a funny like, wow, yeah, I don't know how people do that. So I did kind of touch on this yarn earlier, but I do have a few more thoughts just kind of tied to the materials and everything. So let's have left. Do I have a label here? Oh yes, here we go. So this yarn is 60% cotton and 40% linen. So that answers our question from earlier. And on the leftovers front, I was talking in my last video about being kind of confused about like, is the rest of this project going to use a deceptive amount of this yarn, or am I going to have a ton of this left over? And I don't actually know what the answer to that is. I'm actually going to have my scale here. We're going to weigh it live on camera. How exciting. So what I have, oh no, tried on tubing is creating chaos. Okay. This is my leftover yarn. So I have a ball. I think it's basically the exact same amount of each one because this shirt is like perfectly symmetrical in design, so it should be. So each one has a ball that's about this size and then another little bundle that's smaller. And now I'm hoping that these don't each total more than a whole ball, because then I will be upset that I split them up into two. But because what happened was when I went to start on the sleeves, I was like, well, obviously I'm gonna break into my last ball, and so I might as well keep my life simple and not cut more yarn more times than I need to, not create more ends I need to weave in than I need to, by just starting a new ball for the sleeves, and then I'll finish the ball that I was using for the body on the body. Nothing has to move, everything will be great. And now I'm like, is this more than, what is the amount in each ball? 50 grams. Okay. Are you more or less than 50 grams? Let us find out. 38 grams. So I did need the last ball. So that's good news. So that was not a useless purchase. But I can't believe how little it used. What is the yellow also 38? 37. The natural was 37.8. So I only used like 12 grams, which is also funny because, like I mentioned, I did knit this at a denser gauge than the pattern tells you to. So if I had knit it the way it told me to, would I have only used 2 balls? Because I purchased 3 skeins of each color. Now I'm like, wow, is that like pattern yardage estimate really generous? And because I also think that my top is actually slightly longer than it was supposed to be. I think when I was knitting, it's like knit to X length. And I think just the way it was kind of sitting on my lap when I measured the one time, I was like, oh yeah, that's it, perfect. And then when I went to actually block it, I was like, oh, it's actually like an inch longer than I thought it was, whatever. But so like, given all of these things, if I had just knit it the normal way into the exact written length, would I have even needed the 3rd ball? Which I just find very interesting because in the pattern specs with the yardage estimates, if you go one size up from what I knit, like to knit the 4 instead of the 3, tells you need 4 balls instead of 3. So I really thought I was going to be on like the top end. I really thought I was going to be using like the vast majority of those 3 balls because I'm at like the top size you can make out of that. But I don't know, here we are. Now I'm like, this is an awkward amount. Like I don't think this is something that's super useful to put in my yarn stash just because it's such a specific fiber content. That's not one that I'm working with all the time. So as far as having this in like a library of scraps to use in a scrappy project feels unlikely that it would be useful. It's also the vast majority of each of these skeins. So I'm wondering if it's worth just popping this in my D-stash. Editing Alley will pop in to let you know. If you're like, I need an awkward amount of that to finish my project, please send it to me. My other thought around this material is I think that I might have finally figured out the culprit behind the issue that I've talked about a few times on the channel. This came up most recently in my stash organizing video when I was putting away my like creepy little silicone finger cots that I was explaining that I use when I get like a really dry split finger pad, which for some reason seems to happen to me once in a while on some projects, not as a consistent problem, but as sort of a dire problem when it does arrive. I think I might have figured out the common denominator. I think that this cotton linen yarn, sort of the dryness of it in a way that's different from wool, which has like lanolin as a natural oil in it. I think that it's just drying because I promise this isn't gross. It's mostly healed now. But you can sort of see, I think, the little like diagonal slash like across my finger pad that like was open. I think it's when I use non-wool fibers in projects, because if I think back to other times that I encountered it, one of the prominent ones that comes to mind for me is my Barnsley sweater, which was not using plant-based fibers, but it was using mohair. And then if I'm thinking back, I think that all the times that I've had this problem have been on projects where I was either using a silk mohair or a plant-based fiber. I think that these fibers just have less oil in them that's sort of naturally letting our hands exist as they are while we're working with them. And these other plant-based fibers, or maybe silk in some cases, are just sort of sapping all the moisture out of my fingers. So this is a hypothesis that I definitely need to test from here. Like, I'm not here to confidently be like, that's what the problem is, beware, or like whatever, I don't know what you want to do with that information. I'm not saying that I'm not going to knit with these things, but I'm curious to see if this theory checks out, if this is the common denominator, because at least if that's the case, maybe I could either try to do a better job of like preventative moisturizing, though this has always been something I've been bad at, but maybe I could do a better job of it for short periods of time because I'm working on a specific project. Or being more mindful that like, this is a project where that's probably gonna happen because of what you're working with. Maybe keep some of your creepy finger cots in your project bag so you have them available if you're like out and about away from your beautiful knitting binder. You know, it's my hypothesis. It's the best hypothesis I've come up with since I started observing this problem, and I started observing this problem long before I ever had a YouTube channel. So having one at all, progress. So I'll have to sort of try to keep track of this as I move through other projects and see like, does this actually seem to be what the case is? But for right now, that's what I'm gonna blame it on. My one last material thought is related both to the materials of this fiber, but also of needles. So I have complained on this channel many times about wood needles. I have had sort of one-off bamboo circulars for various reasons at various times. And then I recently, when I was doing my stash reorg video, which if you haven't seen it, it's come up twice now, maybe you should go watch it. But so I decided when I was making that video that I would really like to invest in a set of nice wood needles, because as much as I prefer metal needles, I was finding myself buying more and more like random one-off wood needles that were not good quality and I did not enjoy working with for purposes of travel, because sometimes airport security in different contexts won't let you take on metal needles. It depends on a lot of things. So I was like, I just kind of would like to get like a nice wooden interchangeable set so that I don't have to like worry about this scramble to get wooden needles specifically for a certain project in time for a certain trip. And when I did that, I was like, okay, I don't want bamboo because I've had bamboo and I know I don't like bamboo. And I think I probably just don't like wood needles as much as metal needles in general. But at least from what I understand, I think bamboo is kind of like the grippiest of all the wooden needles. And so if I'm really disliking the friction of wood needles, I think that something that's not bamboo, something that's a bit smoother, might go over better. And I definitely ended up finding that. So I ended up picking up the Luca Umber needles, and I had this project on those needles for a while. I think kind of halfway through the project, maybe the like second third of this project was knit up on those. It did not bother me nearly as much. Like I've had projects where like the second that I got home, I changed it back onto my metal needles because I was like, okay, this was better than not being able to knit at all. But now that I can knit without these needles, I'm losing my mind. I need to get it off them immediately. These ones I did not feel that way. I did eventually switch it back to my metal needles, but I think I only did that like when I was already swapping things on and off of try-it-on tubing to move to different parts of the project. So I think that the Luca Umber needles are just much nicer for someone like me who hates bamboo. They're pretty smooth. But I also wonder if some of it is the fiber content. Like maybe the cotton linen blend just works better with wooden needles than wool does for me and my kind of personal feelings around the friction involved. Like a plant-based fiber just kind of already has more friction. So maybe it just feels more like it's working together or something, or it's just not like interrupting the otherwise perfectly beautiful smooth process I could be having with wool if it were on metal needles, you know what I mean? So I'm definitely not like a convert to using wood needles all the time. I definitely still prefer my Lucas Cypher needles, but I am really happy to have the Umber ones because I'm much happier with them than I was with the bamboo needles that I had before. So like if I'm in a context where I need to use wood needles at all, much happier to be using those ones, and maybe especially when it's with plant fibers. All right, I think that's finally all that I have to say about my Ardent top an hour later. Okay, on the acquisitions front, I do actually have a quick little something to show you. I often don't, but I placed an order from a shop actually associated with a YouTube channel that I've actually recommended here before in my podcast roundup. So that's Fire and Fiber. And Audrey, in addition to having her podcast, which I recommend very highly, she also has an Etsy shop, which I'll link in the description below. And you know what she has in her Etsy shop? Try-it-on tubing. And I have had some of this. I bought a little tin with 3 of them at a time when I didn't like realize how sort of standard a material this was and how giant of spools it can be purchased in for how little money. And I have no interest in owning one of those spools. That's simply too much. But I purchased a tin of 3 try-it-on tubes for so much money. I assume actually probably the tin cost more than the tubes did. But I had been having an increasingly hard time tracking them down. Like I said, I originally had 3. I was down to 1 and it was already in use somewhere on this top and I needed another one. And I was kind of like, I am so sick of constantly trying to figure out where my try-it-on tubing is, especially now that I know how cheap this can be. And Audrey sells little packets of try-it-on tubing for much less money than where I originally got it from. And in cute little multicolor packs. So I have this one, which I think contains a few different lengths of it. And I have a turquoise one also. She is based in Canada like I am, so no duties, hallelujah. And because this is so small and light, she was actually able to ship these just through letter mail, which is so much less expensive. Canada, as soon as something is considered 3D, it costs like $1 million more. So the fact that I was able to get free shipping on these was like, glory, glory, hallelujah. And with those cost savings, why not get a cute sticker to go in my scrapbook on my page about my knitting this year? Now, naturally, like one day after placing that order, I did find all the rest of my try-it-on tubing because this is the way of the world. But I don't think that like 6 or 7 pieces of try-it-on tubing is like an inordinate amount for knitter to have. So I will store those away in my binder and hopefully will not again experience a shortage of them and we'll be able to find one when I actually need one. What a concept. So I will link Audrey's Etsy shop in the description below if you especially are also in Canada and need some try-it-on tubing and don't want to pay $30 for 3 pieces of it. Hey, what are you doing over there? Come on. Hi. What are you doing? What do you smell? No, stay. Yeah. All right, so Copper's now joined us for some pets and to discuss plans for my next cast on. So if you watched my fall knitting plans, you will know that I'm now in a spot where I'm debating between 2 options for my next cast on. So that is either the Rivendell Pullover or the Book Club Cardigan, both of which are by Sarah Nordland because apparently I'm planning a very sorry autumn. Sorry, not sorry. So in deciding between which of these I want to do first, I had a few kind of different thoughts that have led me to my conclusion. So number one is that the Rivendell Pullover is the one that I'm planning to make out of this yarn, which I picked up on my trip to Peru, which is 100% baby alpaca. And out of the two, this is the yarn that's been in my stash the longest. And another factor here is that I, as previously mentioned, have done a lot of knitting flat lately. This was mostly knit flat. My Lakes cardigan was mostly knit flat. I just kind of miss knitting in the round, which makes me feel like maybe a cardigan, is that the thing that I want to knit next? It doesn't sound like my number one choice, but also I cannot deny the impact of factor number 3, which is that, as mentioned in my fall knitting plans video, there is a sort of popular modification to this pattern that is well documented in this one person's Ravelry notes that a lot of other people have since referred to that I would like to do. I like how it makes the cable pattern line up more at the shoulders from the front to the back than it does in the pattern as written. But I'll be honest with you, I don't really want to fuss with that right now. I don't really want to deal with referring to both a pattern and notes and trying to sort of reconcile those things and figure out all the things I need to figure out. I just don't super want to do that right now. So we're not. We're gonna do the Rivendell Pullover. So the Rivendell Pullover is a pattern by Sari Nordland. It's a DK weight knit, and this pattern accommodates bust sizes from 28 3/4 inches to 61 1/4 inches. This pattern costs €8.90 or about $15 Canadian. So like I said, I'm going to be knitting this out of 100% baby alpaca from Manos de la Comunidad, which is a place that I actually got to visit when I was in Peru and see all the alpacas and how they make the fibers and stuff. So it was really, really cool. I'm excited to have this yarn from that and to knit up something that's sort of a souvenir of the experience, and in this color that really reminds me of the mountains there. The Andes are so this color, and so I think it's just going to be a really fun way to look back on and remember that trip every time that I wear this sweater. So I got a bundle of 10 balls of this. They're 50 grams each, and that cost me a grand total of $234 Canadian. So adding in our project cost, that puts us at about $250 Canadian for the project. Now allegedly this is knit up on 3.5mm needles, but I say allegedly because Sari knits so much looser than I do. So this is one where a gauge swatch will definitely be necessary. We'll see how much I need to adjust my needles to match her gauge, but I have only previously knit the, what's it called? The Call It Pullover from Sari. And I knit that out of cotton lino, which is a like hybrid plant fiber yarn mixed with mohair, which is definitely different from alpaca. This will definitely bloom differently, read more probably. So maybe that will help a little bit, but I am expecting some trial and error in trying to match Sari's gauge here because we are just such different knitters, which, you know, is a fun challenge for me because I love her pattern. So I just kind of have to figure it out. And now, as alluded to, based on the fact that I wanted to be doing some knitting in the round, this is knit seamlessly top down in the round construction, but there is this deep V-neck. So I'm definitely expecting parts where I'm doing quite a bit of working flat, but not all of it. There will be some of the body below the V-neck. At the very least, I'll be able to knit in peace in the round. So I'll be looking forward to that. Other interesting thing about this pattern is that the bulk of it is in seed stitch, which I have never done before, or moss stitch. I know they're very similar. I've never done either one, which is odd because I really love how it looks. And I've been feeling for quite a while like I would love to make something that's either moss stitch or seed stitch, but for some reason it's just never happened. So I'm really excited to do that. TBD whether I continue to feel excited about it once I have like the stitch repeat down and I know what it feels like to do, how will I feel about it. But I have done some all over ribbed things and I don't mind that. So I figure it will probably feel similar to do, but TBD. I reserve the right to slander it later if I hate it, but right now I'm looking forward to it. And I do have to do it imminently because I need to swatch for the project, and it does recommend swatching in seed stitch. I really wanted to have that swatch done for today. I really wanted to be able to share a swatch while I was talking about this plan, and you know, I think I would have if the finishings for this garment hadn't taken me 1 million hours. I was originally planning to knit that swatch last night and this just took over. So swatch will have to wait until next time. But I noticed that the pattern, it tells you to swatch in seed stitch, but it also gives you a gauge for the cable pattern repeat of like a specific part of it, suggesting that I should gauge swatch that too. And I'm like, okay, like I think most of us don't love knitting swatches, but many, if not most of us, do it because it's a valuable part of the process, can prevent a lot of issues, right? I'm willing to put in that time for that reason. Am I willing to put in the time for 2 of them? And because here's my other thought, if the needles that get me gauge on the seed stitch, which make up the majority of the body of the sweater, if those needles don't get me the correct gauge on the cable portion, like what's the alternative? Like, am I gonna change needle sizes mid-row to knit the cable part on a different size needle. Maybe my brain's just not working right now, but I can't come up with a way that I would resolve a difference in the required needle size between these two segments because they're all occurring within the same row. And like, I'm absolutely not going to be in the business of changing out my needle tips in the middle of every row every single time. So I guess I kind of feel like as long as my gauge is right on the seed stitch, which makes up the vast majority of it and therefore will account for the most of the measurements of the overall garment, like it's probably fine, right? I should just go off that because I don't even really like understand what the alternative is. Like, is there a way that you could knit only the cabled part of these rows on a different needle than the rest of it's knit with? If you can come up with a way that that happens that isn't super annoying, please let me know, because right now I can come up with nothing. So I'm kind of like, I will just swatch the seed stitch and go from there because I don't really know what else to do. I don't super want to knit two swatches, and I don't even understand what I would do differently if that swatch did tell me it needed a different needle size, you know? So that's where we are. That's what I'm planning for my next cast on. So in my next video, I should have something slightly more tangible to show you for my Rivendell pullover, but that's the plan. All right, that's all I've got for you on the knitting front. So let's get into some off the needles. So for small business shout out, we already talked about it. Again, link in the description for Audrey's shop if you need any try it on tubing or some cute stickers, or I think she has a few other knitting tools as well. Now on the reading front, I would have an update for you here if I hadn't done like an editing alley pop-in book update in my last video, because I filmed that not very long ago from when I'm filming this. So I don't really have an update for you there. I've started a new book, but I don't know, I kind of have concluded, like I used to start talking about books that I was currently reading or that I had acquired on the channel, but I don't know, I've just kind of found like, I don't love the idea of talking about books that I didn't enjoy on the channel because like, I feel like reading is so individual and I don't want to talk anyone out of reading a book, like unless there was something that I find really like sort of actively morally objectionable, you know? But like outside of that, I guess I just don't want to be in the business of being like, this isn't a good book, don't read it. And so I guess unless it's sort of like a mid-book rave of like, I'm not even done, but I'm obsessed with it, you need to read it. Like anything short of that, I feel like I don't super want to bring up on the channel because then it's just like, it's like, well, she started reading it and then she didn't tell us anything about it. I guess it wasn't any good. So the challenge with that is that it means that I only really have reading updates to share when I have read a book, when I've finished a book, which is just a little bit harder. So I don't currently have any real reading updates for you. Maybe though part of this is that, again, this came up like maybe a month or two ago when I was saying like, is there just like more TV on right now? Or is it just like my particular interest? This is happening again. There was like a real wave. This was at the time that Love Island USA was airing, I think. That is its own whole like tidal wave, but there was so much more in addition to that. And now it's back with like different things. And like I had to like write down a list because I was like, I don't remember all these. So like The Summer I Turned Pretty on the edge of my seat of this like weird soapy teen drama right now. Also, this one's a very funny experience to watch for me because I love Jenny Han. I love the To All the Boys I've Loved Before series. I got to meet her at a book signing once. She was so lovely. I love those movie adaptations. I haven't read the Summer I Turned Pretty books, but I watched the first season knowing I love Jenny Han and I was like, oh my god, this is so good. It's the life choices this teenager is making are fascinating and increasingly like brutal to watch, but at this point I'm so invested that I'm like, let's go. I'm seated, let's go. So as of filming, this is actually what I was doing when I was binding off the bottom hem with like the knit two together and then bind off on the folded hem. I was watching Belly's Bridal Shower and then Bachelorette, and I think actually by the time this episode goes up, this season might even be over. So just know that right now I'm on the edge of my seat. I need to charge my laptop. Okay, I had to just like press my face against a wall to get that plugged in, so hopefully my hair is not wild. Anyway, what else have I been watching? I've been watching, oh, Love is Blind UK. I love the UK version. Like, let's be real, I'm obsessed with all Love is Blind, but the UK one, I think because it's so new, it hasn't like sucked in all the influencer people yet, or just people who seem like they're really eager to like play whatever role they need to play to be on the show. Like it just feels so much more real than the US series has in quite a long time, and it feels like it's like normal people with normal problems and not the like weird inflated heightened drama that we often get once a reality show is kind of like really gotten going and picked up momentum, and then starts attracting the kind of cast who wants to be on a show that big, and it just sort of fundamentally changes the show. So I feel like Love is Blind UK is very much still like in the sweet spot of like, this is new enough that it's still like pretty real, and as a result it's so much more interesting to me, and I'm so much more like actually invested in these couples. So right now I've watched the finale with the weddings, but the reunion hasn't come out yet. I'm very curious to see what happens there. If you've not watched the finale yet, spoiler warning, but also to be fair, it has been like more than 2 weeks now by the time you're seeing this, so hurry up. But I really love Meg and Kieran. I think they're like for sure still together at the reunion, no problem. Also really love Cal and Sarover, and I suspect they're probably still together. I'll actually be really upset if they're not. I really like them. And Ashley and Billy I'm really torn on, and they're the ones who like, they have me clamoring for the reunion right now, because I kind of feel like I will lose a lot of interest in the reunion as soon as I see where people are sitting. Because I feel like all I need to know is, are they still together right now? Because with their particular situation, I kind of feel like you've either survived the last like 6 months or a year or whatever it's been since they filmed, or they didn't. Like, you've survived this far and you're totally gonna make it, or you didn't, and we'll see. I guess I just like, for both of their sakes, but like particularly for Ashley's sake, I hope that they're still together, because I hope it's gone well for them and I hope that they're happy. But I also was like kind of sad watching their wedding scene and like how aware she was of how uncertain he was, that like even though he said yes in the end, like I've never seen someone on that show in such a state of like fear and anxiety standing there at the altar, and I'm like even though he said yes, I feel like she just like got the worst wedding day ever, and I feel really bad for her. And I kind of feel like if they're still together, I feel like they should have another wedding where she actually knows they're gonna get married so she can have a better time, because that sucked. I've also been watching Bachelor in Paradise, because Bachelor was my like OG, like dating reality TV is like my favorite genre. Bachelor is what started all that. This season is, I don't even know. I don't know how to feel about this season. If you know nothing about the Bachelor franchise, Bachelor in Paradise, you don't know anything about this, just know that they like radically changed the format of the show in many ways, including adding money into a show where like that was never at all part of the potential outcome, other than like of course sponsorships, like of course that's always a thing, but like an explicit prize pot on the show. And also at the same time radically changing the filming setup, like they're shooting with very different cameras, everything's edited differently and looks very different, and it just feels like Bachelor people were like, but what if we made it look like Love Island and Netflix dating shows had a baby? And it was just a really confused baby who had like no idea what it was supposed to be. And like sometimes it seems like an improvement, and other times it's like we lost the plot so long ago. It's just so confused, and I'm curious to see if this is like the start of it evolving and kind of figuring out something new. But like what are we doing? And even just little things like the theme song always had a very particular sort of like cheesy 80s style. And so they changed it for this new sort of like rebooted version, which like, okay, great, fine. But then like every consecutive week, it was like a different twist on the theme song. Like it was completely different every time. And I was like, okay, that's kind of fun. Like I kind of see what we're doing here and how it's evolving as we're finding out new ways that like the format of the show is evolving. But then suddenly like the last 2 weeks, it just was like exactly the same. And I'm like, so did we just like give up on that? Like I thought part of the shtick was that the theme would always change, and now it's suddenly the same. Did we just like forget to make a new one? Is this just saying we've arrived at the final iteration, but the final iteration is also the most similar to what it used to be? Is this just responding to fan backlash that it's not what it used to be? So they were like, okay, fine, we'll stop our fun changing ones and just make it what it used to be. Like I just don't really understand what's happening, and I don't think anybody else does either, including possibly the people making the show. Also, Love Island USA. The reunion. Like, I know that Netflix one time tried to do like a live reunion for Love is Blind, and it was a disaster of technical issues. I'm not saying they need to do like a live reunion, right? I think that also like most reality TV reunions are filmed for like 12 hours and then cut down into the best like 1 to 2 hours, right? I think you get far better content that way. I don't want it to be live. I think that live reunion Netflix did was the most sort of surface level boring one, because they didn't have time to keep going in these conversations long enough to get to the interesting parts. That said, we could not be filming these things 2 weeks before they air, because the fact that like almost every single couple status was out of date by the time the reunion actually aired, and we knew that like the day that it was airing, in the hours leading up to airing, like I have never been less interested in watching a reunion because I was like, none of what anyone is saying is like true anymore. Like I have no interest in watching these people sit here and talk about how happy they are, blah, 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 when they're now broken up. No, like, I want the version of the reunion that is about that new status. So I just think that, like, especially for a show where like it's filmed and edited and aired within like a 24 to 48 hour period, I just don't understand why we can't turn a reunion around faster than this. I think we can do it, guys. Also, it was just like a depressing watch on like all fronts. Like, not only was it all outdated, but then like Shelly and Olandria are here telling Huda about all the like racism they've been receiving and asking her to just be like, hey, fans of mine, can you maybe not go be racist on my behalf? And Huda couldn't even do that. Also, couldn't even really seem to own up to it on the spot in that conversation. Like, she sort of acknowledged it, but sort of tiptoed around it. There's just a lot of sort of talking around all of the racism that the Black cast members were forced to deal with from everyone except them, right? Like, Shelly and Olandria were very open. They were like, it is racism. That's what we're dealing with. And then everyone else is kind of like, I am so sorry you had to deal with that hate, people being mean. And it's like, it's actually a very specific kind of hate. And it's kind of useful to name exactly what it is. And there just seemed to be like a hesitancy among a lot of people on that stage to do that. That was kind of disheartening, particularly given the like multiple racism scandals of cast members on this season and what we just found out about Kenny with Janae from last season. Like, last summer Love Island just felt like so much fun. And this summer it's just kind of been like womp womp. Like, that's so many hours of my life for something that turned out to be that depressing. And that's the thing, is I had so much like hope from last summer because it was so good. And this summer like started out feeling promising and for long enough that I was like into it and invested. And then it just like all crumbled kind of toward the end in a way that was just very like, wow, so glad I just spent all this time on that. But at the very least, honestly, what often gets me into new reality shows is just when my favorite podcasts talk about them. And then I'm like, love to see it's talking about it. Two Black Girls, One Rose is talking about it. I guess I have to watch it because I need to know what's going on because I want to hang out with Natasha and Justine and Emma and Claire. It is what it is. All right, that's all that I've got for you today. So thank you so much for coming to knit with me. I would love to know, what is your process like for figuring out what your next cast on is going to be? Like, how do you decide what you want to work on next? And if you'd like to be here next time, I hope you'll consider subscribing if you haven't already. If you already have, though, you're my favorite. And I'll see you next time.